On my first day at the new job, I found a photograph of my husband on a coworker's desk. I smiled and asked, "Who is that?" She beamed with pride. "That's my boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years and we're planning to get married at the end of the year." On my first day at this new company, I had promised myself I would remain perfectly calm. Starting fresh at 32 isn't easy, but I knew I had the skills. I'm Allison, the new senior marketing manager at a fast-growing tech firm in New York City called TechSphere. I had fought my way through countless corporate battles, handled multi-million-dollar contracts, and dealt with the most difficult personalities imaginable. I thought nothing in an office environment could ever throw me off balance. I was wrong. My desk was separated from the next by a frosted glass partition. On the other side sat a fragile-looking young woman. She had long, slightly wavy hair, flawless makeup, and wore a subtle, expensive-smelling perfume. She turned to me with a bright, welcoming smile, the kind that easily wins people over. "Are you Allison Davis? I'm Maya, your project assistant. Welcome to Tech." I smiled and shook her hand. "Hi, Maya. I look forward to working with you." I said it casually while placing my bag on the chair and pulling out my laptop. My mind was already running through a to-do list. Review project files, check the budget, read through the marketing collateral, and schedule a team meeting. But then my eyes accidentally drifted to Maya's desk. Not because of her beauty or her smile, but because of a silver picture frame sitting on the left corner of her workspace, sitting next to a small potted succulent. The frame was so spotless it caught the office lights, as if its owner polished it daily. And in that photograph was my husband. I wasn't mistaken. It was impossible to be mistaken. The man in the navy blue polo shirt, that familiar half smile, the dimple on his left cheek, and those eyes looking straight into the camera with warmth and confidence. It was Michael, my husband, the man who just last night had been making homemade pasta for me in our kitchen, who had hugged me from behind and whispered, "Tomorrow is your big day. Good luck, sweetheart." There was another detail in that photo that made my breath catch in my throat. The navy polo shirt he was wearing. I bought it for him for our 3rd wedding anniversary. And if you looked closely at the background, you could see the deep blue ocean and palm trees leaning toward the water. It was the exact scenery from the beach in Maui, where we had vacationed right after I closed a massive marketing campaign. That photo was supposed to be sitting on the nightstand in our bedroom. I knew that because I had framed it myself, but now it was right here, sitting on the desk of a young woman in my new office. The naked truth laid out right in front of me. A loud ringing started in my ears, as if all the hot blood in my body had suddenly rushed to my head, only to instantly drain down to my feet. I didn't fall, but my knees went weak. I've been through a lot in my life, but in that moment, I learned what it feels like when your entire world collapses in absolute silence. I didn't start asking questions right away. I sat down, took a deep breath, and started typing meaningless words into my laptop just to have a shield. Then I casually turned around, forcing my voice to sound as light and breezy as a new employee's should. "Maya, who's the guy in the picture? He's handsome." Maya's eyes lit up as if I had just brought up her absolute favorite subject in the world. She pulled the frame closer and gently traced the glass with her finger, treating it like a precious jewel. "This is my boyfriend, Allison. His name is Michael. We've been together for 3 years. It's my favorite picture of him, so I brought it to the office for motivation. We're getting married at the end of the year." The words 3 years hit me like a physical blow. 3 years. Michael and I had been married for 7. That meant since the 4th year of our marriage. He had been living a second life. I kept smiling. It was the smile of a woman accustomed to hiding her emotions behind flawless makeup. I smiled so perfectly that anyone watching would think we were just having polite office small talk. "So, you're going to be a bride soon. Congratulations." "Yes, I'm already so nervous," Maya said, holding up her left hand. Under the fluorescent office lights, a diamond ring sparkled on her ring finger. It wasn't just any ring. You could tell at a glance that it was incredibly expensive. A large stone, radiant cut, reflecting light like a sharp blade. "He proposed to me last month." Allison. He told me he wants to give me the wedding I deserve. We're planning a huge reception at a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan, and I'm already looking at designer dresses. My throat felt like sandpaper. Michael had once told me that he didn't care for flashy displays, that an engagement ring should be simple because love isn't measured in diamonds. I had believed him. I wore a modest thin gold band that he claimed suited our minimalist lifestyle. I had actually been proud of that simplicity. Now I understood. It wasn't that he disliked luxury, he was just saving it for someone else. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. What does your fiancé do? He works in investment finance. Maya answered as casually as if we were discussing the weather. He's been doing incredibly well lately, always busy, so he works late a lot. But he takes such good care of me. I repeated it in my head. Michael Davis, my husband, the man who just yesterday told me he was swamped with a big project this week and would be coming home late. The man who kissed my forehead this morning before leaving the apartment. I heard myself ask the next question. My voice was even laced with just the right amount of polite curiosity. Where did you guys meet? At an industry conference in Dallas. He was a guest speaker, and I went up to him afterward to get his contact info. Mia said, beaming like a girl recounting a fairy tale. He was really guarded at first, but I was persistent and he finally caved. He told me I was the one who made him want to finally settle down. The phrase settle down felt like a cruel, twisted joke because I was his wife, the woman he had already chosen to settle down with, cemented by a marriage license. I blinked once, just once, to force back the tears threatening to spill. I thought about all the times he used late meetings as excuses, the text saying he was stuck at the office, the weekends he claimed he had sudden business trips. I used to complain a little, but I eventually stopped because I trusted him. I trusted him the same way I trusted that our apartment wouldn't spontaneously catch on fire. Suddenly, Maya looked at me and asked a question that felt like it was ripping my heart out. What about you, Allison? Are you married? I looked back at the photo on her desk. Michael's smile in that picture was the exact same smile he gave me. Turns out a smile could be divided by 2 or 3 and still look completely whole and genuine. I answered without changing my expression. Yes, I've been married for 7 years. Maya's eyes widened slightly and she let out a soft laugh as if she were hearing about ancient history. Wow, 7 years. That's a long time. I bet your relationship is super calm and steady by now. I've heard that after 7 years, people easily get bored of each other. She said it without an ounce of malice, but every word was a razor blade slicing into my skin. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the twisted fate that had placed me in this exact situation. This girl knew absolutely nothing, innocently chatting about the 7-year itch while I sat in the middle of a corporate office, forced to play my part flawlessly. I nodded, offering a tight smile, calm and steady. That's its own kind of happiness. The most important thing is respect and loyalty. So true, Maya agreed. Turning back to her monitor, I turned back to my laptop. 2. On the screen was my marketing plan, budget spreadsheets, and a list of action items. But my brain couldn't process a single word. Something deep inside me had shifted like a heavy set of gears violently clicking into place. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't grab the silver photo frame and smash it against the wall. I just sat up perfectly straight, rested both hands on my keyboard, and let my fingernails dig into my palms until it hurt. One clear thought echoed in my mind. I need to find out everything. A few minutes later, an admin assistant walked by and tapped on my glass partition. Allison, Mr. Sterling would like to see you in the conference room for a quick project brief. I stood up. Sure, I'll be right there. I stepped away from my desk, walking right past Maya. She was happily typing away, occasionally glancing at the photograph and smiling, a smile of pure bliss that sent a chill straight down my spine. I walked toward the elevators, catching my reflection in the polished steel doors. My gray tailored suit fit perfectly. My hair was pulled back into a neat, professional knot. My lipstick was a dark, confident shade, and my eyeliner was sharp. I looked like a successful, modern woman stepping into an exciting new chapter of her career. No one would ever guess that just minutes ago, my entire life had been torn to shreds by a framed photograph. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I pressed my hand against my chest. My heart was pounding, but not in panic. It was a warning rhythm. For 7 years, I had lived in a marriage I thought was a safe harbor. If Michael was capable of building an entire second life behind my back, then I was more than capable of building a plan of my own. I didn't know exactly where this plan would lead me, but one thing was certain. From this moment on, I was no longer the naive wife who believed in late nights at the office. I was going to dig up every buried secret, and I was going to take back exactly what was mine. And my investigation was going to start right here in this very office. My first meeting at the new company felt like watching a movie in slow motion. I sat near the head of the table. In front of me was a presentation full of market analytics. Around me were the faces of my new colleagues, passionately debating product strategies, media budgets, and Q3 projections. I nodded, took notes, and occasionally offered a sharp professional insight right on cue. So everyone believed I was entirely focused, but in reality, I wasn't in that room at all. In my head, the image of that photograph on Maya's desk kept flashing, accompanied by her voice. We've been together for 3 years. 3 years. That number was a massive, ugly crack running down the foundation of my 7-year marriage, rendering every memory I had blurry and tainted. When the meeting ended, the room emptied out until only Bob Sterling, the department head, remained. He looked at me with an approving smile. You catch on fast, Allison. I know you handled massive accounts back when you worked in Chicago. We're lucky to have that level of expertise here in New York. I smiled politely. Thank you, Bob. I'm just hoping to integrate into the team as smoothly as possible. Bob nodded. It's a young team, but they hustle. By the way, we have a new investment consultant coming in from one of our partner firms soon. Very important contact. You'll likely be coordinating with him on the upcoming rollout. I didn't think much of it. It was standard corporate procedure. But I asked out of politeness, when is he arriving? Sometime next week. Probably. I haven't met him personally yet. Only heard good things from the executives. I nodded, grabbed my notebook, and stepped out of the conference room. Once in the hallway, I realized I was gripping my leather notebook so tightly my knuckles were white. I forced my hand to relax and took a slow, deep breath. My mind had locked onto a single objective verification, not because I was clinging to some pathetic, desperate hope that this was all a misunderstanding. I knew I wasn't wrong, but I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. Walking back to my desk, I saw Maya typing briskly. The photograph sat silently in the corner of her workspace, blissfully, unaware that it had just detonated another woman's reality. I sat down and opened my laptop, but my eyes inevitably drifted to her side of the partition. Maya caught me looking and smiled. Allison, a few of us grabbed lunch at this great little bistro down the block. Do you want to come with us? I forced a nod. I'd love to, thanks. While waiting for the lunch hour, I pretended to study project briefs. In reality, my hands were opening a new incognito tab. Social media. I typed in Michael Davis. His profile popped up immediately. His profile picture was still the one of us taken 2 years ago during a wine tasting trip to Napa Valley. I stared at it for a few seconds. In the photo, I was leaning against his shoulder, smiling radiantly. At that time, I believed the man beside me was my rock, my partner for the rest of my life. I scrolled down. Most of his recent posts were strictly professional photos from boardrooms, networking events, generic quotes about investing in leadership. No trace of another relationship. I wasn't surprised. Michael was always meticulous and rarely posted personal updates. But one photo from 2 months ago caught my eye. He was standing on a brightly lit stage at a financial seminar in Dallas. Hundreds of attendees were seated in the audience. I checked the comments. The top comment, full of hard eyes and praise, belonged to an account named Maya Jenkins. I stared at the image. Michael was wearing his tailored charcoal suit. The stage lights highlighted his confident jawline. I remembered that exact day. He had told me He needed to fly to Dallas to handle a crisis with a major client. I had packed his suitcase and reminded him to take breaks because of his brutal schedule. Turns out he was here, standing on a stage, soaking up applause while the woman sitting in the audience looked up at him with pure adoration. A wave of cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't a sudden mistake. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a relationship built methodically, systematically, and right out in the open in another city. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Michael. "How's your first day going?" "Beautiful." I stared at the glowing screen. If he had sent this yesterday, I would have immediately replied with a heart emoji and a long paragraph. Now, the words felt like a sick performance. I typed a short reply. "It's fine. Good company." He replied instantly. "Glad to hear it. I'm going to be home late tonight. Got a dinner meeting with some clients." I glared at the screen. Client meeting. Those two words suddenly carried a massive, repulsive weight. I typed slowly. "Okay, don't work too hard." I put the phone face down. No extra questions. No nagging. At exactly noon, the team gathered for lunch. The bistro was just a few minutes away on a side street. It was a cozy place with exposed brick walls and the smell of roasting garlic. As everyone ate, the conversation flowed easily. I chimed in when appropriate, but my absolute focus was on Maya. She was naturally talkative, laughing frequently, and kept bringing up Michael with unmistakable pride. "He's just so incredibly busy with the firm, always chasing new capital, but he always makes time for me," she gushed. One of the guys from the design team teased her. "Must be nice. Sounds like your future husband is a real catch." Maya blushed deeply. "He really is. He told me that once we're married, we're going to buy a place of our own. He's already been looking at luxury condos in Hudson Yards." I had my fork halfway to my mouth, but my hand froze. Hudson Yards. Michael had recently mentioned to me that he was looking into investing in a property in Hudson Yards. He told me it would be purely for rental income, a smart asset for our portfolio. I had agreed without a second thought. Maya continued, her eyes practically sparkling. "He told me a man's job is to provide a beautiful home for his family." I felt so safe when he said that. I swallowed the bite of salad. It tasted like ash. I looked at the young woman across the table. She had absolutely no idea she was the supporting actress in a twisted psychological thriller. To her, this man was a modern-day Prince Charming. After lunch, we headed back to the office. Walking through the doors, I saw the framed photo on her desk again. This time, I wasn't shocked. Instead, a new razor-sharp feeling settled in my chest. Resolution. I opened my laptop and got to work. While everyone assumed I was deep into Techsphere's marketing metrics, I had secretly opened a hidden spreadsheet. I started logging everything I had learned. Names, timelines, the Dallas conference, the engagement timeline, the Hudson Yards condo plan. Every detail was a puzzle piece. The afternoon flew by. When it was time to clock out, I packed my bag. "See you all tomorrow." Maya stood up and grabbed her coat. "Which way are you heading?" "Allison." "I'm taking the subway." "Oh, I'm calling an Uber." "Have a great night." I nodded. "You, too." Stepping out of the office building. The evening sun was dipping below the Manhattan skyline. The city was loud, chaotic, and bathed in the orange glow of street lights flickering to life. I stood on the corner waiting for the light to change when my phone buzzed again. Michael was calling. I swiped to answer. Hey, sweetheart." His smooth voice came through the speaker. "I'm in the cab heading to the client dinner now. Go ahead and eat without me." I stared at the endless stream of yellow cabs rushing past. "Okay," I said, my voice perfectly level. He chuckled softly. "You must be exhausted from your first day. Get some rest. See you later tonight." The call ended. I stood still for a moment as a crystal clearer thought crystallized in my mind. If he had successfully managed a double life behind my back for 3 years, the little truths I uncovered today were just the tip of the iceberg. I hailed a cab. As the car sped downtown, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a specific name. Sarah, lawyer. I stared at the name for several blocks before locking my screen. I knew I didn't need to rush this, but I also knew that starting today, I was going to hoard everything: evidence, timelines, financial records, everything. Because if my marriage was built on a lie, I sure as hell wasn't walking away empty-handed. My story was just beginning. The cab pulled up to my Upper West Side apartment building just as true darkness settled over the city. The warm, golden light spilling from the luxury lobby made the building look incredibly peaceful. Anyone walking past would assume it housed nothing but happy, successful families. I paid the driver and walked through the heavy glass doors. The doorman, Hector, smiled warmly. "Good evening, Mrs. Davis. Home a bit early today." I nodded, just a bit tired. First day at the new job. The elevator doors closed, taking me up to the 20th floor. When I unlocked our door, the familiar scent of our home hit me like a physical weight. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The gray velvet sofa I had spent weeks picking out, the heavy oak dining table Michael loved, and the beautiful landscape painting in the living room we had bought during an anniversary trip to Sedona. This was the life we had built over 7 years. Every single object held a memory, but looking around now, the warmth was gone. The apartment just looked like a crime scene full of question marks. I dropped my bag on the console table, slipped off my heels, and walked into the kitchen. Out of sheer habit, I opened the stainless steel fridge to see what I could make for dinner, but I froze. "I'll be home late. Client dinner." I let out a harsh, quiet laugh. The word client had suddenly taken on a very vivid, sickening new meaning. I shut the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and sat heavily on the sofa. I held my phone in my hand. Part of me wanted to scour Maya's social media again. Another part wanted to rip through Michael's iPad to find more breadcrumbs. But I stopped myself. I knew that if I acted purely on emotion, I would get sloppy. I needed to remain completely surgical. Around 8:00 p.m., my phone lit up. A text from Michael. "Dinner is running long. Probably won't be back until after 10:00. I stared at the text, then stood up and walked into our master bedroom. The nightstand on his side of the bed was where Michael kept his personal documents. I opened the top drawer: passports, some old corporate contracts, and a small leather notebook. I flipped through the notebook. Just scribbles about yield rates and board meetings. Nothing incriminating. I closed the drawer and walked over to his walk-in closet. His tailored suits and polos hung in perfect color-coordinated rows. I ran my hands over the fabric. Suddenly, I stopped at a dark charcoal suit jacket. I remembered this suit. He wore it to that Dallas finance seminar. The exact same photo I saw on Instagram this afternoon. I reached into the inner breast pocket. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a receipt from an ultra-exclusive Omika's sushi restaurant in Manhattan. The date was exactly 3 weeks ago. The total came to $550. I stared at the crumpled paper, and a memory clicked into place. 3 weeks ago, that was the night Michael told me he was taking an important potential investor out to dinner. I had asked if I should wait up for him. He had kissed my cheek and said, "Don't bother, baby. These guys like to drink. It's going to be a late one." I sat on the edge of the bed, the receipt burning a hole in my hand. 3 years. It's a massive amount of time. That meant over the course of 3 years, there had been hundreds of these late client dinners. I opened my phone and found Mia's Instagram again. This time, I scrutinized her profile like a forensic investigator. I looked past the smiling selfies and focused on the backgrounds of her travel photos, the fine dining shots, and the romantic captions. She rarely tagged Michael or showed his full face, likely because he asked her to be discreet for his career. But the clues were everywhere. A photo of a cappuccino on a marble table. Resting next to it was a men's Rolex, the exact Rolex I bought him for his 35th birthday. A picture of 2 glasses of red wine clinking. In the corner of the frame, a man's hand rested on the table. The simple, minimalist gold wedding band on his finger was unmistakable. I dropped the phone onto the mattress and let out a slow, shaky exhale. Any lingering doubts were obliterated. Michael wasn't just having a careless fling. He was actively, comfortably maintaining two separate existences. At exactly 10:30 p.m., I heard the front door unlock. Michael walked in looking exactly as he always did. He took off his overcoat, hung it in the hall closet, and walked into the living room, stopping when he saw me sitting quietly in the dim light. "Hey, you're still awake." I shook my head. "Just waiting up for you." He smiled, that same charming smile, and walked over to rub my shoulders. "How was the rest of your first day?" I looked straight into his eyes. "It was fine. Productive." He nodded and walked into the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. I tracked his every movement, the way he opened the cabinet, the way he drank, the way he rolled up his sleeves. It was all so agonizingly familiar, but now it was like watching a stranger wear my husband's skin. When he came back into the living room, I asked the most mundane question possible. "So, who was the client tonight?" Michael didn't miss a beat. "A group of tech investors flying in from Singapore. They're looking to park some serious capital in a new fintech rollout." He delivered the lie flawlessly, smoothly, without a single micro-expression of guilt. I just nodded. Yesterday, I would have believed every word. Today, I realized Michael was a masterclass liar. He sat down next to me and slung an arm around my shoulder out of pure muscle memory. "If you're tired, let's head to bed." I stared at him for a second. The image of Maya blushing and showing off her diamond ring flashed behind my eyes. Two women, one believing she was his lifelong partner, the other believing she was about to become his bride. And the man sitting next to me was perfectly content living right in the middle of their devotion. I stood up. "I'm going to bed." I walked into the bedroom and shut the door. Lying under the covers, I listened to the sound of the shower running in the master bath, the steady drumming of water against tile. I stared at the dark ceiling, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I had two choices. Option 1, detonate the bomb right now. Scream, throw the sushi receipt in his face, and turn our luxury apartment into a war zone. Option 2, stay silent, collect every piece of the puzzle. Half an hour later, Michael slipped into bed next to me. He turned off the bedside lamp, wrapped his arm around my waist, and pulled me close just like he did every single night. "Night, baby," he whispered. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. In the pitch black, I finalized my strategy. Tomorrow, I would start digging into the real details: his corporate calendar, the transaction history of our joint accounts, and every single client meeting he claimed to have. Because if Michael had the patience to hide in the shadows for 3 years, I had the patience to drag every single one of his secrets into the light. And when the truth finally broke, I was going to be the one holding the detonator. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky over Manhattan was still a bruised hazy gray with the first rays of sunlight just beginning to hit the glass skyscrapers. Michael was still asleep next to me, his breathing deep and even. His heavy arm was draped lazily over my waist. To anyone else, this was the picture of domestic bliss. But to me, the peace was suffocating. I carefully slid out from under his arm, got out of bed, and walked into the master bathroom. My face in the vanity mirror looked calm, but my eyes were sharper, harder than they had been in years. I splashed freezing cold water on my face, letting the shock wake up every nerve ending. When I walked out of the bathroom, Michael was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. His hair was messy, and he flashed me a sleepy smile. "You're up early, baby." I nodded. "I need to get to the office early today to prep for a strategy meeting." He stretched, walked over, and kissed my forehead, the ritual of every morning. "How did you feel about the team yesterday?" "They're fine," I said smoothly. He smiled and walked over to his closet. I watched him select a crisp, white dress shirt. Every motion he made was now subject to my intense scrutiny. I wasn't watching him out of love anymore. I was watching him like a predator, studying its prey. He turned around, buttoning his cuffs. "I've got back-to-back pitches today. Might be a late one again tonight." I nodded effortlessly. Okay. He didn't notice any shift in my demeanor. Why would he? After 3 years of getting away with it, he assumed my blind trust was a permanent fixture. We ate breakfast together at the island counter. While he ate, Michael scrolled through his phone. I noticed a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth as he read the screen. "What are you smiling at?" I asked, casually sipping my black coffee. "Good news in the markets." He glanced up quickly. "Oh yeah, just an article about some tech stocks rebounding." I nodded, but when he stood up to put his plate in the sink, he left his phone on the counter. The screen lit up with a push notification. Message from Maya. "Can't wait for tonight." I stared at the glowing words for exactly 3 seconds before looking away. My heart didn't race. The panic from yesterday was gone, replaced by an icy clinical detachment. Michael returned, scooped up his phone, and slid it into his suit pocket, completely unaware that I had seen the message. He kissed my cheek. "Have a great day at work. Love you, too." I lied seamlessly. The front door clicked shut. I stood alone in the kitchen. Message from Maya. A fake late night at work. I pulled out my own phone and opened his text from yesterday. "I'm going to be home late tonight. Client dinner." A lie repeated so often it had become muscle memory. 30 minutes later, I walked out of the building. The subway ride downtown gave me plenty of time to think. I didn't need any more proof of the affair, but I needed ammunition. I needed the paper trail. When I arrived at the Tetchfair office, Maya was already at her desk. She was organizing her planners, humming quietly to herself, radiating joy. When she saw me, she gave me a wide smile. "Good morning, Allison." "Morning." I dropped my bag on my chair and opened my laptop. A few minutes later, Maya leaned slightly over the partition. "Allison, last night, my fiancé took me to this amazing new Omis place in Manhattan. It was unbelievable." I slowly looked up from my screen. "Really?" "Yeah." He said we haven't had a proper date night in a while, so he wanted to spoil me. I offered a thin smile. "That's very sweet of him." She giggled. "He's the best." I turned my eyes back to my monitor, the $550 receipt in his suit pocket. Everything lined up with sickening perfection. The morning vanished into a blur of emails and onboarding meetings. But my peripheral vision remained locked on Maya. Every time her phone buzzed, she would check the screen and smile like a teenager. Around noon, she stood up. "Allison, I'm running down to the lobby cafe. Do you want an iced Americano?" "Yes, please. Thank you." The moment Maya stepped into the elevator bay, I glanced over at her desk. Her phone was sitting face up next to her keyboard. I didn't reach for it, but the screen illuminated with an incoming iMessage. "Michael, tied up this afternoon. I'll pick you up out front tonight." I quickly shifted my gaze back to my spreadsheet as I heard the click of her heels returning. She set the iced coffee on my desk. "Here you go." "Thanks, Maya." She sat down, immediately picked up her phone, and I watched that familiar glowing smile spread across her face. A bizarre feeling washed over me. It wasn't jealousy. It was absolute certainty. Michael was running 2 parallel timelines. When the workday ended at 5:00 p.m., I purposely lagged behind. I stood near the lobby doors, pretending to reply to an urgent email on my phone. 5 minutes later, Maya breezed past me, heading out onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk. She stood near the curb, looking expectant. A sleek black Audi pulled up. The driver's side door opened, and Michael stepped out. He was wearing his white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, holding the keys with that effortless charm. Maya practically skipped over to him and threw her arms around his neck. I was standing less than 50 feet away behind the lobby glass, watching every single frame of the movie. Michael leaned down, whispered something that made her laugh, and opened the passenger door for her. They drove off into the Manhattan traffic. I stood there for a long time. Any lingering ghost of denial I might have harbored evaporated into the city smog. The truth was stark, undeniable, and currently driving down Fifth Avenue. My husband and the girl sitting 3 feet away from me were playing house, completely oblivious to the fact that I held all the cards. I turned and walked toward the subway. The game has officially started, I thought, and this time, I'm not playing defense. I didn't go straight home that evening. After watching Michael drive off with Maya, I took a cab down to the West Village. The city was transitioning into its neon-lit nighttime persona, but this neighborhood still felt somewhat grounded. I found a parking spot for my thoughts near the Hudson River Pier and just sat on a bench for a long time. The city lights mirrored on the black water, splintering like broken glass. 3 years, for 3 entire years, Michael had funded, nurtured, and lived a separate life right under my nose. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Michael, dinner with the clients is running long. Don't wait up. I read the text, locked the screen, and shoved the phone back into my pocket. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because replying felt like participating in a pathetic theater production. I was ready to cancel. I stood up and walked a few blocks to a quiet coffee shop near Washington Square Park. This was where I always met Sarah, my closest friend since college. She was the only person I trusted implicitly. More importantly, she was a high-powered family law and asset protection attorney. When I walked through the door, Sarah was already sitting in our usual corner booth, sipping a black tea. She looked up, her sharp eyes scanning my face. Allison, why the emergency text? What's going on? I slid into the booth across from her. The barista set a black coffee in front of me. I watched the steam curl into the air before I finally spoke. Sarah, I think Michael has a second life. Sarah didn't gasp. She didn't drop her mug. Her lawyer instincts instantly kicked in. She frowned slightly, her posture straightening. Are you sure? I nodded slowly. Not just a fling, a long-term established relationship. 3 years. Sarah placed her hands flat on the table. Walk me through it. From the beginning. I told her everything. My first day at Techsphere, the framed photo of him in Maui, the diamond engagement ring, the text messages, the Omoka's receipt, and standing in the lobby just an hour ago, watching him pick her up. Sarah listened in total silence. She didn't interrupt once. When I finally finished, she let out a slow, heavy breath. 3 years. Yeah. Sarah looked me dead in the eye. What's the endgame here? Al. I looked down at my hands. I don't know the exact steps yet, but one thing is absolute. When this blows up, I am not walking away the loser. I will not let him take what is mine. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping an octave. You're talking about the assets. Yes. I met her gaze. The Upper West Side apartment, the stock portfolios, the savings. We built our net worth together. If he's been using our joint funds to bankroll this fantasy life, I need to know. Sarah gave a curt nod. You're absolutely right. She reached into her designer tote and pulled out a sleek legal pad. In cases like this, emotion is your enemy. Evidence is your currency. Evidence. Exactly, Sarah said, her tone clinical and reassuring. If you confront him with suspicions and anger, he'll gaslight you, hide the money, and drag out a divorce until you're bleeding legal fees. But if you walk in with an airtight ledger of infidelity and financial dissipation, especially using marital assets on a paramour, you hold a massive tactical advantage. I nodded, absorbing the strategy. I understand. You need to track 3 things. Sarah listed on her fingers. Money, time, and cohabitation. Check his credit cards and your joint accounts. Has he been wiring her money? Time. Document every single client dinner and match it with her social media. Cohabitation. Prove they are presenting themselves as a couple. I took a sip of my coffee. I've already started doing that. Sarah paused, looking at me with a mix of surprise and deep respect. You're much calmer than I expected. I gave a bitter half smile. The shock wore off. Now it's just logistics. Sarah took a sip of her tea. Does the girl know you exist? No. I shook my head. She thinks he's a bachelor. She's completely convinced he's her fairy tale fiancé. Sarah sighed. Then, she's a victim in this, too. I know. I remembered Mia's blinding, innocent smile. Sarah tapped her pen against the notepad, which means you need to be incredibly careful. If Michael even sniffs that you're auditing him, he will scorch the earth and destroy the paper trail. I won't let him. Sarah studied my face for a long time. Allison, are you actually okay? I looked out the cafe window. New Yorkers were rushing by on the sidewalk, wrapped in coats, completely unaware of the implosion of my life. No, I whispered, but I will be. Sarah closed her notepad and slid it back into her bag. When you're ready to drop the hammer, you say the word. I've got your back. Thank you. Sarah, We sat in comfortable silence for a few more minutes before I left the cafe. When I swiped into my apartment building, it was past 11 p.m. Michael still wasn't home. I walked into the dark living room, didn't bother turning on the main lights, and went straight to the guest bedroom office. I opened my personal MacBook. The encrypted spreadsheet I had started yesterday was waiting. I added new columns, dates, locations, Olibus, financial anomalies. Every lie, every text, every receipt was a puzzle piece. At 11:45 p.m., the front door clicked open. Michael walked in, loosening his silk tie, looking appropriately exhausted. "Hey, you're up late," he called out. I walked out of the office, closing the laptop behind me, just wrapping up some emails. He dropped his leather briefcase on the entryway table and sighed. "Brutal negotiations tonight. These guys from Singapore are relentless." "Really?" I asked, my voice perfectly flat. He walked past me, heading for the bathroom. "Yeah, I'm beat." I watched his back disappear around the corner. Money, time, and cohabitation. Sarah's words echoed in my head. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a high-stakes chess match, and I wasn't going to make a single aggressive move until I had him entirely cornered. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. The space next to me was cold, and a yellow post-it note was stuck to my phone on the nightstand. Had an early breakfast meeting. Have a great day. Beautiful. Love. MS. A note like this would have made me smile. A small reminder that my busy husband still thought of me. Now, the cursive handwriting just felt like a slap in the face. The facade of care was still there, but the foundation was rotten. I got out of bed, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen island. I flipped open my laptop. The spreadsheet from last night was still running through my mind. Time and locations were falling into place. But, as Sarah had warned me, the most critical element was missing. The money. I logged into our joint Chase Bank portal. We use this account as our primary financial hub for the mortgage, utilities, and major household expenses. Michael, being the finance guy, usually managed the aggressive investments. So I rarely scrutinized the line items unless we were doing our taxes. Today, I downloaded the last 12 months of statements. I scrolled past the mundane conison. Whole Foods, dry cleaning, the HOA fees, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I hit a transaction from late last month. A wire transfer for $2.500, recipient M. Jenkins. My hand froze on the trackpad. I read the name 3 times to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Maya. I scrolled further down. Another transfer for $1.800 sent 2 months ago. Recipient M. Jenkins. A cold, heavy dread settled in my stomach. I kept scrolling. 3 months ago, 5 months ago, 8 months ago. The wire transfers were relentless. Sometimes $1.000, sometimes $3.000. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. Michael wasn't just cheating. He was actively siphoning our marital assets to fund his second life. I opened my spreadsheet and started frantically typing. I logged every single date, amount, and recipient code. Every number felt like a needle slipping under my skin, but I forced myself to remain completely analytical. After an hour of auditing the past year, I calculated the sum. The total amount transferred to Maya Jenkins was just over $45,000, but that wasn't the worst of it. I dug into the savings withdrawal history. Just 2 weeks ago, a massive wire transfer cleared our high-yield savings account. $50,000. Pay Hudson Luxury Developments, LLC. I stared at the screen, my breath turning shallow. 50 grand. Our money. My money. That was the down payment for the luxury condo Maya had been bragging about. The nest he was building for his new bride. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Sarah checking in. "Did you find anything?" I stared at the screen and typed back. "He's wired her $145,000 over the last year, and he just used $150,000 of our savings for a down payment on a condo in Hudson Yards." My phone rang immediately. "Allison, tell me you took screenshots." I exported the PDFs. I said, My voice eerily calm. I heard Sarah exhale sharply on the other end. Okay, this elevates everything. This is textbook dissipation of marital assets. Legally, a judge will crucify him for using joint funds to buy real estate for a mistress. I looked back at the spreadsheet. I'm saving everything to a secure cloud drive. Good. Send a backup copy to my encrypted email. Sarah instructed. And Al, he cannot know you found this. If he suspects anything, he'll move the rest of the money offshore. He won't know a thing. I promised. I hung up, finished organizing the digital files, and emailed the encrypted folder to Sarah. By the time I closed my laptop, it was almost noon, just as I was getting ready to head to the office. My phone rang. It was Michael. Hey, babe. He sounded chipper. Just checking in. Are you going to be working late tonight? Why? I asked, looking at the spreadsheet numbers, still burned into my retinas. I've got another late dinner with the Singapore guys trying to close this funding round. Right, I said, smoothly. Yeah, I might be at the office late. Too. Big marketing push. He chuckled. Looks like we're both burning the midnight oil. Love you. Yeah. I hung up. When I arrived at the Techsphere office, Maya was sitting at her desk looking absolutely radiant. She was practically vibrating with excitement. Allison, she gasped as soon as I sat down. You won't believe it. I dropped my bag. What? Michael and I went to look at that condo in Hudson Yards yesterday evening. It's breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows. View of the river. I looked at her, my expression blank. A condo, yes. Maya nodded vigorously. He said a man needs to secure the foundation before the wedding. He already put the deposit down. I turned my eyes back to my monitor. I remembered the $50, 000 wire transfer. He was incredibly serious about this. A new luxury condo, a new wife, an entirely new existence. Later that afternoon, a delivery guy walked into the office carrying a large, heavy shopping bag from Saks Fifth Avenue. He dropped it off at Mia's desk. Oh my God, Maya squealed, pulling a matte black shoebox from the bag. She popped the lid and held up a pair of Christian Louboutin heels. The red soles flashed under the office lights. Look at these. Allison. Michael sent them to the office. He's so romantic. I glanced at the shoes. Gorgeous. Maya sighed happily. He told me he wants me to wear them to his big investor cocktail party next week. I turned back to my laptop, recalling the $950 charge on our shared AMX from 2 days ago. The meticulous pieces of his double life fit together so perfectly it was almost poetic. When 5:00 p.m. hit, I decided I needed to see it for myself. I left the office 15 minutes early and grabbed an espresso at the Starbucks, directly across the street from our building. From my window seat, I had a perfect view of the Techsphere lobby doors. At 5:15, Mia walked out and stood on the curb. A few minutes later, Michael's Audi pulled up. He got out, smiling. That $1 million smile. Maya hugged him, and they got into the car. I didn't hail a cab. I already had my rental car parked down the block for exactly this reason. I jumped in, started the engine, and pulled into traffic, keeping 2 cars between me and Michael's Audi. We drove west toward the river, finally pulling into the valet lane of a glittering new glass skyscraper in Hudson Yards. I parked on the street across the avenue and watched them get out. From 50 yards away, I saw Michael and Maya walk into the glossy sales center. They stood in front of a massive architectural model of the building. A sharply dressed real estate broker was pointing to the upper floors. Gesturing grandly, Maya was clinging to Michael's arm, looking up at the miniature towers with absolute awe. Michael had his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture of intimacy and ownership that made my stomach churn. The broker handed Michael a glossy brochure. Michael nodded confidently. I stood behind a scaffolding structure, completely hidden from view, and pulled out my phone. I zoomed in and snapped half a dozen crystal, clear photos of them with the broker looking at the model. I wasn't doing this to torture myself. I was doing this to build a guillotine. 20 minutes later, they walked out, got back into the Audi, and drove off. I walked slowly back to my car. The Manhattan skyline was lighting up, millions of windows glowing like a giant grid. Michael thought He was the architect of his brilliant new future. He had no idea that he was leaving a trail of gasoline behind him, and I was holding the match. When I finally got back to our apartment, Michael wasn't home yet. I booted up my laptop, created a new folder labeled Hudson Yards, and dumped the surveillance photos into the encrypted drive. I added a new row to my master spreadsheet. Location: Hudson Yard Sales Center. Evidence: photographic. The war room was fully operational. The next few days at the office were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I went to work, sat 3 feet away from my husband's mistress, and listened to her enthusiastically narrate the destruction of my marriage. One morning, Maya rolled her ergonomic chair closer to my desk. "Allison, can I get your professional opinion on something?" "Sure. What is it?" I asked, not looking away from my screen. "Michael is officially launching his own independent investment firm." Maya beamed. "He's trying to lock down a massive round of seed funding next week at his investor party. I've been helping him with the marketing deck. Could you take a look?" I froze for a fraction of a second. His own firm. Yeah, he's breaking off to start a boutique fund. She proudly emailed me the PDF file. I opened the attachment. The cover slide featured a sleek modern logo. M&M Capital Partners. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. M&M, Michael and Maya. I scrolled past the mission statement and the market analysis, straight down to the corporate structuring page. Chief Executive Officer, Michael Davis. Director of Operations. Stakeholder, 20% equity, Maya Jenkins. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. The money he had been siphoning from our savings wasn't just for a condo or designer shoes. He was using our joint marital assets to capitalize a brand new corporate entity. And he had given his 24-year-old mistress 20% of the equity. I slowly looked up at Maya. She was smiling, waiting for my praise. "What do you think?" she asked eagerly. I closed the PDF. "The branding is very clean. He must really trust you to bring you in on the ground floor." Maya's chest swelled with pride. "He does. He told me I'm his true partner in everything." A bitter, hollow feeling echoed in my chest. Partner in everything. I wondered how many times Michael had whispered those exact words to me over the last 7 years. That evening, I left work early. I didn't go home. I took a cab to the corporate address listed on the M&M Capital pitch deck. It was a boutique commercial building in Midtown. I slipped past the distracted lobby security guard and rode the elevator to the 8th floor. Down a quiet hallway, I found a frosted glass door with a temporary plaque. M&M Capital Partners. I didn't go inside. I stood in the hallway and listened. Through the slight gap in the door, I could hear voices. Michael's voice commanding and confident, explaining yield projections, and Maya's voice chiming in occasionally, playing the role of the supportive co-founder. They were pitching a potential backer. I turned around and walked back to the elevator. The final puzzle piece had clicked into place. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He was executing a calculated exit strategy, a new company, a new luxury home, a new wife, and he was financing the entire transition with the money I had helped earn. When I unlocked the door to our apartment later that night, the city was glittering outside our floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood in the dark living room, looking around at the beautiful furniture, the art, the life we had curated. It was all a movie set, a facade held up by my blind trust. I opened my laptop, uploaded the M&M Capital pitch deck to my encrypted drive, and called Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me. He started a new firm." I said, my voice deadpan. "It's called M&M Capital, Michael and Maya. She's listed as a 20% equity partner." Sarah went dead silent on the line. When she finally spoke, her lawyer mode was in overdrive. "Allison, if he used marital funds to seed a new corporate entity and gifted equity to a third party, we're going to destroy him in court. He's essentially embezzling from the marriage. I have the pitch deck. I have the corporate address. I have the wire transfers." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "What's your next move?" I looked out the window at the endless grid of Manhattan lights. "I'm going to introduce myself. Where? He's hosting a major investor cocktail party on Friday night to secure seed funding. Maya is going as his co-founder and fiancée. Sarah let out a low whistle. A public execution. I like it. Are you sure you're ready for the fallout? I've been ready since my first day at Techsphere, I replied. I hung up at 10 p.m. Michael walked through the front door. He looked relaxed, energized by his secret corporate maneuvering. He took off his suit jacket and walked into the living room, pausing when he saw me sitting on the sofa. Hey, you're up late again. Just couldn't sleep, I said smoothly. He sat down across from me, unbuttoning his collar. Man, I am swamped this week. How are the new investments going? I asked, looking him right in the eye. Michael froze for a fraction of a second, but his recovery was flawless. What do you mean? You mentioned you were looking at some new fintech startups. How's that going? He let out a practiced chuckle. Oh, that, yeah, it's going well. Just moving some pieces around the board. Actually, I'm hosting a small networking cocktail hour on Friday night for some potential partners. Oh, at a hotel. He blinked. Yeah, at the plaza. Just a boring finance thing. Sounds important, I said softly. Michael leaned forward and rubbed his temples. It's critical for Q4. I'm hoping after this closes, things will finally calm down and we can take a real vacation. Just the two of us. I nodded, staring at the man I had married. He had absolutely no idea that I had stood outside his secret office just hours ago. He didn't know I had read his pitch deck, audited his bank accounts, or photographed him buying a condo for another woman. I'm going to bed, I said, standing up. Okay, baby, I'll be right in. I walked into the bedroom and shut the door. The game was set. Michael thought he was about to launch his brilliant new future on Friday night. He was right about one thing. Friday night was going to change his life forever. The days leading up to the investor party felt agonizingly slow. On the surface, I played the role of the diligent tech sphere manager and the supportive Upper West Side wife. But internally, my mind was a countdown clock, ticking down to Friday at 8:00 p.m. In the office, Maya was practically floating. She could talk of nothing else but the party. On Thursday morning, she rolled her chair over to my desk, holding up her phone. Allison, I need a fashion crisis intervention. I turned away from my emails. What's up? Which dress for the M&M launch party tomorrow? She swiped through 3 photos. A red cocktail dress, a navy gown, and a sleek, elegant white sheath dress. I pointed to the screen. The white one. It's elegant. Very Founders' wife energy. Maya beamed. You're so right. Michael said this party is going to be the turning point for our entire lives. I'm sure he's very busy preparing. I said quietly. He is. He's barely sleeping. But he told me I absolutely have to be by his side to meet the major capital backers. I offered a tight nod. It was fascinating to watch her completely buy into a reality that was about to vaporize. After work, I went to Saks FTH Avenue. I walked straight into the designer evening wear section. I wasn't looking for something flashy. I wanted armor. I bought a stunning, impeccably tailored black Tom Ford midi dress. It was sharp, sophisticated, and radiated absolute lethal confidence. I booked a blowout and a makeup appointment at a luxury salon for Friday afternoon. When I looked in the fitting room mirror, the woman staring back at me wasn't the betrayed, weeping wife Michael might expect. She was a woman holding all the executioner codes. Friday finally arrived at 300 p.m. Maya packed up her desk with a giddy squeal. I'm heading out early to get ready. Have a great weekend. Allison, good luck tonight. Maya, I said, and I genuinely meant it. She was going to need it. I left the office an hour later, went to the salon, and got ready. By 7:30 p.m., I was sitting in the back of an Uber Black, pulling up to the Plaza Hotel. The midtown streets were chaotic, but as I stepped through the revolving brass doors of the hotel, the noise of the city faded into the hushed, expensive hum of old money. I checked the directory for the private event spaces and walked toward the Astor Suite. The heavy mahogany doors to the suite were propped open. Inside, the room was bathed in warm amber light. Waiters in white coats circulated with trays of champagne. About 40 people. wealthy investors, tech brothers, and finance executives were clustered in small groups, chatting amiably. At the front of the room stood a projection screen displaying the sleek M&M Capital Partners logo, and standing right in the center of the room, holding court with a group of older investors, was Michael. He looked devastatingly handsome in a custom midnight blue tuxedo. He was laughing, exuding absolute dominance and charm. Standing right next to him, wearing the white sheath dress, was Maya. She was clinging to his arm, looking up at him like he was a god. I stood in the doorway for a full 10 seconds, just observing the theater. A hotel staff member approached me with a clipboard. "Good evening, ma'am. Are you here for the M&M Capital event?" "Yes," I said smoothly. He handed me a blank name tag and a Sharpie. "If you could just fill this out." I took the marker and wrote 2 words in bold, deliberate letters. Allison Davis. I peeled the backing off, slapped it onto my black dress, and walked into the room. At first, nobody noticed me. The jazz music played softly, and glasses clinked. I walked slowly toward the center of the room, grabbing a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. Then, Michael turned his head. His eyes swept across the crowd and locked onto me. In a fraction of a second, the charismatic, confident CEO vanished. All the color drained from his face. His jaw went slack and his entire body went rigid as if he had just been struck by lightning. I smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile and walked directly toward him. The investors he was speaking to noticed his sudden paralysis and turned to follow his gaze. Mia turned too. "Allison." Mia gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" I stopped exactly 3 feet away from them. I looked at Maya, then shifted my gaze to Michael. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" "Michael." My voice was perfectly modulated, calm, polite, but loud enough for the immediate circle to hear. Michael couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Maya looked frantically between the 2 of us. "Wait, Allison, you know Michael." I turned to the young, naive girl who had been sitting next to me for weeks. "Yes, Maya, I know him very well." The silence in our little circle suddenly felt heavy. The surrounding conversations began to die down as people sensed the tension. Michael finally found his voice, though it sounded like he was choking on glass. "Allison, please, let's step outside." "Outside." I took a sip of my champagne. "Why? You threw this beautiful party to launch your new venture. You invited your investors, your partners. You even invited your mistress. But you forgot to invite your wife." The word wife dropped into the room like a live grenade. Complete, suffocating silence fell over the Astor Suite. The jazz music seemed to fade away. Dozens of eyes snapped toward us. Maya froze, her face turning an ashen gray. Her hand dropped from Michael's arm as if he had caught fire. "Wife." Her voice trembled violently. "Michael, what is she talking about?" I didn't let him answer. I turned to the group of wealthy investors standing right beside us. "Good evening, gentlemen. I apologize for interrupting the pitch. I'm Allison Davis, Michael's wife of 7 years." An older investor in a tailored gray suit frowned deeply, looking at Michael. "Michael, is this true?" Michael looked like a trapped animal. Sweat was beading on his forehead. "Listen, this is a private, personal matter. It has nothing to do with the firm. Actually, it has everything to do with the firm." I cut in smoothly, my voice carrying across the silent room. I gestured toward the M&M Capital logo on the screen. "Before anyone writes a check tonight, you should probably know that the seed capital for this company was embezzled from our joint marital savings." A collective murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Maya was hyperventilating. She took a step back, her hands covering her mouth. You told me you were single. You told me you wanted to marry me." Michael reached out for her. "Maya, baby, please let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked sharply. I opened my clutch purse and pulled out a folded stack of bank statements. I dropped them onto the cocktail table right in front of the investors. "These are the wire transfers. Over $45,000 sent directly to Maya Jenkins over the last year and a $50,000 wire transfer for a luxury condo down payment in Hudson Yards, all drained from our joint accounts. The older investor stared at the documents on the table, his expression hardening into pure disgust. He set his champagne glass down. Michael, if you are commingling illicit funds and exposing investors to a marital asset lawsuit, this firm is dead on arrival. No, wait, Jim, I can fix this, Michael pleaded, panic entirely consuming him. We're done here, the investor said coldly. He gestured to his associates. Let's go. Like dominoes falling, the guests began moving toward the exit. The grand launch party had turned into a toxic crime scene, and no one wanted to be caught in the blast radius. Michael stood in the center of the rapidly emptying room, completely decimated. Mia looked at him, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You lied to me for 3 years. You used me. Michael stepped toward her. Maya, I love you. I was going to leave her. I swear. Don't touch me, she screamed, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of a devastating, humiliating pain. Did you know when I was showing you the pitch deck when I showed you the ring? Did you know? I found out my first day at the office. I said softly, I'm sorry, Maya. She let out a choked sob, turned on her heel, and ran out of the Astor suite. And then there were two. Michael and I stood alone in the center of the massive empty ballroom. The M&M Capital logo mocked him from the screen. His empire, his second life, his entire carefully constructed reality was lying in ashes at his feet. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and utter defeat. Are you happy now? You destroyed everything. I looked at the man I had loved for 7 years. I felt no rage. I felt no sorrow. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. I didn't destroy anything. Michael, I said calmly, you lit the match. I just opened the door so everyone could see the fire. I turned my back on him and walked out of the suite. The long hallway of the plaza felt infinitely quieter than the ballroom. The clicking of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound. When I reached the lobby, I stepped out into the cool Manhattan night air. The city was still loud, still chaotic, still rushing forward. I took a deep breath. My phone vibrated in my clutch. It was Sarah. Well, she asked. It's done, I said, watching a yellow cab pull up. He lost the investors. He lost the girl. Sarah let out a victorious laugh. And the money is ours to fight for on Monday. Go home and pour yourself a drink. Allison, you earned it. I took a cab back to our Upper West Side apartment. When I unlocked the door, the place was pitch black. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight out onto the balcony overlooking the Hudson River. The wind was sharp, whipping my hair around my face. 7 years of marriage, 3 years of betrayal, and just a few weeks to burn it all to the ground. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. Michael walked in. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His tie pulled loose. He looked like a ghost. He saw my silhouette on the balcony and walked out to join me. We stood side by side in the dark, looking out at the city lights. The silence between us was heavier than it had ever been. Did you have to do it like that? His voice was completely hollow in front of everyone. I didn't look at him. Did you have to lie to my face for 3 years? Did you have to steal our money to buy her a life? He didn't answer. He gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles white. I am sorry, Allison. It's too late for that, I said, my voice empty of any emotion. I want a divorce. My lawyer will be sending the papers on Monday. We are going to sell this apartment, and you are going to return every single dollar you took from our joint accounts. Michael closed his eyes and slowly nodded. There was no fight left in him, no lies left to spin. He knew he was utterly defeated. He turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone in the dark. I stood on the balcony for a few more minutes, staring at the endless expanse of New York City. I didn't know exactly what my future looked like yet, but as I watched the lights reflecting on the dark water, I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes burning everything down is the only way to build something.